Hi there, my name is Luke and I will be taking you through a comprehensive look into the development of the novelty baseline rowing test known as the E2MOM. The goal of this project was to create a reliable, valid novelty baseline test for teams to use to determine game day performance potential. In this case, the test was tailored towards rowing crews. This project arose out of inspiration and interest which grew from the principles and methods of the Conconi test, which was developed by Conconi et al. In 1996. The test was developed to evaluate and test runners' lactic threshold and anaerobic fitness. It is also a well-developed measuring tool of anaerobic fitness. The test is usually performed by having an individual run around a 400-meter track. Every 200 meters, the athlete is responsible for increasing their speed. Their initial starting pace is completely up to the athlete as to how fast they want to start with, but it is recommended they start out on a steady pace, as every 200 meters they will have their splits recorded. So as it should go, the times will slowly decrease up until they can no longer run the 200 meter any faster. They are running continuously. In a study done by Silic et al. In 2005, it was mentioned that the modified version of the Conconi test could be performed on C2 ergometers to be a reliable test for measuring anaerobic threshold performance in elite male rowers. It was actually mentioned in a study done by Siddle et al. In 2003 that a rendition of the Conconi test done on an ergometer could also be used as an indication of cardiovascular and pulmonary health. It was also mentioned by Moritane et al. In a study conducted in 1981 that critical power should be taken into account just as much as lactic threshold when evaluating rowing performance potential. These insights inspired the creation of the E2MOM baseline rowing test. The test can be best described as an ergometer beat test. Every 2 minutes, the athlete will be asked to row to a target calorie count. On the first 2-minute set, they start on an 8-calorie target, and the target increases by 2 every 2 minutes until they can no longer reach the target within the 2-minute block. For this project, our aim was to determine the reliability and validity of this test. In order to do this, we decided to test 2 groups of 5 participants. Participants in Group 1 were all high-performance rowers who had been rowing for at least 3 years and are currently active. Group 2 had never been inside a rowing boat and had never rowed before. This group was classified as non-rowers. In regards to the measurements and comparisons done and taken during this project, we took heart rate every minute into the 2-minute cycles, score was recorded as the final calorie target reached, and their individual splits were recorded down for each interval as well. The equipment that was used consisted of a Concept 2 ergometer Model E and a Polar Electro heart rate monitor band and watch. Participants were free to choose their own damper setting when they completed the test. Once the participants had reached their limits and stopped the test, they were given a cool down on the rower as well as a debriefing. Now that we have covered the E2MOMS method, we will now begin to talk about and discuss the results through analyzing independent sample t-tests, evaluating significant differences, and appraising visual graphs and results. Here we have a table chart of the calorie results achieved within 2 minutes for both the high-performance rowers and non-rowers. For both trials 1 and 2, as expected, the high-performance rowers did much better than the non-rowers, as well as the fact that both groups improved in their scores the second time attempting the test. Another interesting aspect of the difference between these 2 groups is heart rate. Here we have a column graph that shows the difference in heart rate over 10 minutes into the test, and you can see that the high-performance athlete hovers closely around the 100 beat per minute mark quite well, whereas the non-rower makes a much bigger spike closer towards 150 beats per minute and above. Here we have our first trial's independent samples t-test results. The key indications of the overall calorie score being vastly different between our high-performance rowers and non-rowers are the overall mean, being 42.8 cals and 28.4 cals. Secondly, we have a significant difference of 0.001, which is less than 0.005, making the first set of results significant. In this next image, we have our second trials independent samples t-test. Knowing now that all participants have had a run-through of this test before, it can be expected that they will most likely improve on the second time around in regards to them having a better idea of pacing of what to expect. The overall mean increased for both groups, and the test results became more significant, being less than 0.005 at being 0.000. Now that we have gone over our results and looked at our t-test comparisons, let's discuss the underlying physiological mechanisms that are being tested here, why the high-performance rowers did better than the non-rowers, and my criticism of the test and how it could be better. Let's start with the main underlying physiological mechanisms, these two being aerobic capacity and lactic threshold. Coast et al. Described aerobic capacity in a study conducted in 1973 as when the highest amount of oxygen consumed during maximal exercise and activities that use large muscle groups like the legs, arms, or a combination of the two. Davis et al. Mentioned in a study conducted in 1985 that lactate threshold, or also known as the lactate inflection point, is the exercise intensity at which the blood concentration of lactate begins to exponentially increase. Now, the reason the test was built around utilizing these two mechanisms is because rowers who are able to use lactate as an energetic source and push through the pain are more efficient and will row longer at a higher power output. And with aerobic capacity, muscles need oxygen. The more oxygen they are able to uptake, the more of that O2 gets transferred to the muscles at work. Now let's go over my main criticisms of this test. Firstly, we have the drag factor. Not everyone was rowing on the same level of drag. High-performance rowers had their preference, mainly based on position. Those who were non-rowers had no idea what was considered a good fit for them or not, so they chose to leave it where the previous person had. In order to make this test more valid, a consistent drag factor needs to be kept throughout all testing. Secondly, because of the many testing sessions, the same rower was not always used. To clarify, the same model was used, but because there is an inconsistency still as to the fans having all been cleaned out the same amount. An erg with less dust in its fan is going to turn calories over smoother than one that has more. And lastly, we have the 2-minute window. Now, instead of using a 2-minute window to complete your target calories, I feel the test would be much more efficient if we used a target calorie that then, once completed, would lead into 20 seconds of rest before they could start the next round. Benefits of this would lead to a shortened testing period, as well as a speed factor of the test. As average testing times went with 2-minute windows to complete your target calories, the test took about 30 to 45 minutes each to run, which is way too long. To conclude this oral presentation, our key findings for this research project were high-trained rowers performed much better than non-trained rowers when completing this novelty baseline test for elite rowers. Inconsistencies in ergometer usage can affect the validity of testing results, and having a relative low heart rate while having a high power output might suggest a strong level of capacity for endurance. Thank you for watching this oral presentation. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact me via email on the following slide.